Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today on this webinar for communications technology and dental operations during the time of coronavirus in the dental industry. My name is Gina Ellis. I am the Director of Business Development for EDMs USA. And on our call today to share their expertise, we have three wonderful gentlemen. We'll start with Alex Malone of Solution Reach, and he will get into a little bit more detail as to what Solution Reach does and who they are. Peter Evans of Enterprise Dental Management Systems. He will introduce himself a little bit more and explain where his expertise comes from. And the person we have in common and the reason we're all together today is Greg Mahoney of Elite Dental Partners. Greg has experience both with a very large DSO, which he is in now, but also a small family practice and everything in between. And he'll talk about DSO operations, technology and communications, and how he's using some of his favorite technologies to exit COVID and relaunch businesses while we begin to open. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today, and thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you, Gina.
Thanks, Gina.
So we have, the title is Top DSO Shares Secrets on Data and Communication Tools to Boost the Bottom Line. Who would like to start?
Today on our agenda, before we kind of do a little bit more background on Peter and Alex and myself, we'll talk about our agenda and what we'd like to cover today. So first, establishing where we are, what the reality is, and how we're going to pull ourselves out of this situation that we're in. As dental operators, as practice owners and employees, but also as community members, what kind of communication is necessary for this? What type of measurements should we have on our businesses so that we can measure success and compare against where we once were? We'll cover those pieces. We'll talk about how to communicate with our patients, our staff members, and others through this piece. And then we'll talk about long-term success and what mindset is needed, as well as what things you can set ourselves up with data requirements and communication pieces, as well as regular operations at the practice. So why don't we take this moment here for Alex, why don't you introduce yourself, get a little bit of background?
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Alex from Solution Reach. I manage our mid-market and enterprise team over at Solution Reach. We've been helping organizations grow for many years. I've been with Solution Reach for about a little over 5 years now, and we cover every vertical from dental up to major health systems. So it's really great to be able to learn all the positive things we've done across healthcare in general, and spread that across the different verticals. So a little bit about me.
Peter?
Hi, I'm Peter Evans from Enterprise Dental Management Systems. I'm the founder and the CEO. We specialize in the aggregation of data specifically in the dental industry. And one of our target markets, of course, is DSO and the integration of data on a large scale. When I say collecting data, it allows us to provide metrics across all facets of the dental industry. Working with Greg Mahoney at Elite Dental specifically, we have the ability to assist in finance, operations, marketing, media management. There's no part of their business that we can't touch and assist in. And certainly in a time like this when digital is king, so to speak, because we're all working remote, it gives us a lot of flexibility and power in how we can help businesses come out of the COVID problem successfully.
Thanks, Peter. And my name is Greg Mahoney, Senior Director of Strategy at Elite Dental Partners. I spend a lot of my time working on how technology and operations meet to support individual practices as well as the support center. And so I move between a lot of different departments: marketing, accounting, finance, operations, and others, in order to make sure that we have the pieces in place to properly support our organization and continue to grow practices and connect with patients.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's great having you here. Really looking forward to this conversation.
Take it away, Alex.
Awesome. So a little bit, something I wanted to point out here is Harvard Business Review posted, had an article a while back about during downturns, businesses with top revenue and growth rates have 3 common features. Number 1, they act early. They take a long-term perspective. Number 2, and then number 3, they focus on growth rather than cost cutting. So these 3 things coupled together allowed businesses to really come out on top after a downturn in the economy or many other things during different areas of the country that have happened. They found that this was these 3 points were huge for those types of businesses to grow. But the biggest challenge that we all have is how do you emerge stronger than before? And this is an opportunity to separate yourself by doing those 3 things and looking ahead to the future and seeing what you can do. So we're going to talk about those today and how you can do some of these 3 things and really focus on building your business as opposed to shrinking your business over time. Greg,
I love this slide, Alex. With your permission, I'm going to steal it from you when this is over.
Yeah, totally. No, definitely go ahead.
No, it just speaks so clearly into really what you need to do in terms of putting strategy together and move forward. We fought long and hard internally in our company to come up with a concept around which we could do something to move forward in an environment where you can't have a normal business, you can't have a sales cycle, you can't sell to closed businesses. But what you can do is come up with creative solutions to help key them up so when they do open their doors, they can launch and be successful, and as importantly, measure their forward progression. And I think Greg will be able to speak very, very clearly to this because he's in the middle of doing this on behalf of his company. So I love the concept. It speaks very clearly. Greg, why don't you tell us how you're doing this?
So the first part, what we needed to make sure that we started communicating with patients immediately. So right now we're starting to get towards let's get back into action and see those patients in. Attendees from around the country and in the US as well as in Canada are starting to see, okay, what are we going to do when we open if you're not open already? And the first piece is to communicate and over communicate to patients. There's a lot of concern around safety, around what's the process going to look like. And so we chose to jump out there early, but that's on the outward facing pieces. On the inside, we were looking at, okay, where were we, for the 6-month averages before COVID? What did those look like by practice, by procedure category, by procedure code, so that we could see what was going on and how things changed during COVID. And then as we're coming out, how are things growing? Are we seeing new trends in the way that patients are consuming dental services, the way that dentists are presenting services? And we want to make sure that we understand those pieces so we can appropriately support our doctors, the additional clinicians and staff members there, but number 1, our patients. And so we focus on different reports that would show us, who's coming in for hygiene, who did we break, who did we have to break appointments with, how are we going to fit them back into the schedule. So we can talk more about those particular details as we go through some of the slides here, but we took a lot of care to focus on acting early and looking ahead. The right way, whether you're running down the street or you're riding a motorcycle or you're driving a fast car, you're looking to the horizon to make sure that you know what's coming up, and you're using your peripheral vision to look at what's immediately in front of you because you've already seen it before. And so I think that'll help us here.
Something interesting as well is I spoke with some other doctors of solo practices, and they talked about the things that they weren't able to do because they were busy dealing with patients and taking care of patients. So they were able to go into office and not see patients and get things in line that they needed to get in line for them to open back up. So even if it was paperwork or setting other things up or doing small maintenance items, taking that long-term perspective to say, hey, we're gonna be ready to roll right when we open back up is huge with everything possible. So.
Perfect. All right. So when we go to act early, what does that mean? And for us at Elite, that was essentially a 3-step process, and it was measure and assess, like I spoke about before, and we were using a lot of reporting and analytical tools in order to do that. And yeah, EDMs and Peter's team helped us create some customized pieces. They had some things out of the, as kind of out of the gate with us as well that were used to do that. And we needed to define what is the reality right now. And, at its worst, the production went down to, 4% of what it once was. And now we're much back and closer to 60% of where we were before COVID. And that's with not all states and locations fully open yet. But without having centralized data, and we have 105 locations using 3 different patient management systems, we needed to combine all of those things together so that we could see where were we, what are we doing now, and what will success look like for us in the future. We had to do the same thing with, well, what are the patient expectations? And what can we do in order to make sure that our patients understand what's going to happen when they come back to the office, whether it's for an emergency during COVID or it's once we're restarted and it's in our soft opening stage or it's in a full live open environment. So we took those pieces and developed a plan. All right, great. We're going to make operational adjustments to make sure that we see how we change our check-in process so that we're not having as many touch points with patients. You'll see them, you'll communicate with them, but there is reluctance around passing clipboards and pens and other pieces inside the office, and so we want to adjust for those things. On the communication side, we've done a lot to push out automated reminders as well as segment patients and groups who had appointments or are due for appointments and change the messaging so that we could better reach them and explain what the new norm is in the office. And Alex and his team have helped us with that. And then on the production goals, we've been focusing on, okay, what do we need to do? How do we need to right size everything as we're coming back in? What does hygiene look like in the future? What is our access to care look like? And we've been using a lot of reporting that we've customized in order to do that. The last piece here was make it happen. What do we need to do in this new environment? And the biggest piece was focusing on short-term wins. This is a piece that in any change management situation that you have, there's always the piece to keep people involved and on board with what's going on to create situations where you can create a successful piece and build off of those things and link them together. And so we did that with individual communications and what does your go live look like? Not putting too much pressure on those offices, but providing them all of the resources that they needed.
Hey, Greg, when you guys developed your plan, talk to me a little bit about that. How often did it change? Did it change daily, weekly? Who else did you involve? How low on the totem pole, per se, did you go? Did you go down to hygienist? Did you go down to office manager? Who else's input did you get on this plan of action, if you don't mind me asking?
This, with the very first state that went live, and that was, or the very first states, that was Indiana, Tennessee, Indiana and Tennessee for us. And it went from our executive team at Elite all the way down to all of our frontline providers, our dental assistants, our hygienists, everybody was involved in that piece because we need to make sure that at the bottom levels, everybody felt comfortable coming back to work. If they weren't comfortable coming back, then we weren't going to be able to see patients and tell them that they could even come in for services. And in the beginning with things changing at the state level and governors releasing new information almost sometimes twice a day. They would have different public announcements, one in the morning and one at night. In case something changed, we would have to be responsive to that. And so you would see the whole organization just turn as quick as it could in order to adjust and make sure that everything was happening there. But in the very beginning, it was daily changes that were going, throughout the entire organization. And then once the first couple states went live, then it wasn't as, we knew what kind of to expect. And so we didn't have as many reworks there.
Did you kind of do a rollout with your staff as they came in, as opposed to bringing everybody in? How did you figure out what your staffing requirements were in the beginning?
So in order to find those staffing requirements, we had to go even further, all the way down to the patients. So we were contacting patients, whether it was through text message, through email, or phone calls, in order to make sure that we could see if they were going to keep the appointments that were on the schedule. During the time period, we kind of had some idea of, hey, maybe it'll be close to, the 1st of May or the 1st of June, or et cetera, on when that office or when that state would reopen. So we would cancel everything up to that date, and as we got closer, then we would start canceling maybe 1 or 2 days of patients. Well, everybody else who was left on the schedule, we just started calling to confirm those appointments. But we had to make sure that all of those staff members were able to come in. But if we didn't have the patients, then we weren't asking the staff to come in. And those were tough situations because the COVID put all of the dental support companies in positions where they needed to furlough employees, and independent dental offices were doing the exact same thing. And so it was really on a patient demand piece, but always counterbalancing that with, all right, what hygienists, what people can we bring back? Do they have other medical needs at home now because of COVID? And so we can't activate them back again. And so I had to keep that in mind.
And I guess that's the planning portion where you've got to plan day by day, what worked, what didn't work, who's coming in, where are they, tracking the patients that you've got to call forward, that sort of thing. It's just a constant evolution, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
So no, go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So here in communicating, and I'll work with Alex a lot on this one, we needed to rethink how we were speaking with our patients. And there are a lot of patients to speak with, especially with 105 locations, hoping to open. And whether they were opening or not, we need to be able to update those patients with what was going on and what to expect. And so we used groupings of patients, whether they had an appointment on the schedule that we needed to break, or blanket messages that would almost be like a newsletter to our patients in order to inform them of what's going on and what that new check-in process might look like. Alex, what have you seen as best practices in this area?
Yeah, Greg, like you talked about, over communication was pretty much key. If people didn't want communication, they would either opt out or they would say, hey, I don't need any more messaging. But newsletters are great for weekly or bi-weekly, because they can choose to just delete that message. And then text messaging through group messages for appointments for that day. That's huge as well. So whatever communication tool you use, make sure that you have the ability to do group messages via text for notifying of office hours or if you're going to be opened or closed. One thing that's really big is letting patients know that you're going to be open, so that they can actually come for their appointment. Sometimes people aren't sure if you're going to be open or closed. So sending out those messages the night before for appointments for the next day, and then also letting patients know what your hours are going to be for the future. And you can do that through a text message or a newsletter, whichever works best, or both. Really, I get both. My wife only gets text messages, but I get both emails and texts from our providers. So really, how did you guys decide, Greg, what you were going to do? You did both newsletters and text messages, from what I understand, correct?
That's correct. So we grouped patients, so there were emails and text messages that were linked together there. And then our newsletters were more general pieces. So the groups that involved emails and texts together, those specifically talked about appointment reminders of people that were coming in, and confirmation pieces, but also spoke about, hey, the check-in process is going to be a little different now. In many locations, the reception area and waiting area in an office is not big enough for social distancing. So the parking lot becomes an extension of that waiting room. And so we're utilizing two-way text messages with patients in order to help check them in. So our emails and text messages to patients always included a pre-visit instruction of call or text us from the parking lot when you arrive, and we'll mark you down as here, and then we'll contact you when we can bring you into the office, maintaining social distancing and when the doctor's ready for you.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Oh, I was gonna say that has actually been very well received across all of our locations, and patients have not complained one bit about checking in from the car. Whether they're very sensitive to COVID or not, patients have been very compliant with that new check-in process. And we combined this with digital intake documents. So we're able to collect the information. They could pull up in the parking lot and then receive or fill out their health history and other dental information and insurance information from the car on their mobile device, and then we'll have it inside the office. And just keeping things as contactless as we can. Obviously delivering dental services is not like delivering pizza. It can't just be left on the front porch when you order it. We have to be there, and our providers are in the mouth, but we try to make everything as safe as we possibly can and over communicate with the patients. And out of all of our locations, I've only seen one patient so far that was like, hey, I don't want to have any emails anymore. I'm like, okay, no problem. We can turn that off for you.
Yeah, so picking the communication tool that can customize on a per patient level, a per location level, and really a per regional level is great, because you can go down to that individual patient and remove them from specific communication tools such as Solution Reach. But then not only that, making sure those group messages, for those of you who haven't used group text messages through a system like ours, what the beauty of that is, it's not a text message thread that you would have going on with your friends and family members. It's the ability to send one message to dozens of people or hundreds of people, and it goes out to all of them individually, and it allows them to text back and ask questions. And that, coupled with our two-way texting tool Conversations, allows the practice and the patient to now text back and forth and resolve any other concerns that they may have before their appointment, before coming in. Maybe the notification that you'd sent them through the group message talked about the new instructions for check-in, and so they had a couple more questions about that. Really, and then allowing them to fill out so you're not handing them a clipboard when coming in is huge. That perception of, hey, is this clipboard clean? The patient doesn't know. They would assume that hopefully it was clean, but if you can take away that fear altogether and have them do it from the comfort of their own device, it's a huge win for you and for them. So,
and Alex, the part that was most critical to us was how easily we could roll out that type of communication solution, how much education would need to be put in place, those materials or other pieces in time and presentations in order for our staff to be able to manage it. And what we found is that an online dashboard that just shows the two-way text messages coming in, all of our front desk staff, office manager, business assistant, they keep that screen open all the time on their computers so that they can always have that chat open with patients all the time who ask a question or check in from the parking lot. It's right there. And we haven't had any complaints from any of our operators on that so far.
Well, it's simple. It's like they're texting from the office phone number, just like they would text on, their smartphone, but it's just the program on your computer. So it's really simple and really straightforward. Patients can actually send pictures as well of their insurance cards if need be. So we've made it function just as if the patient feels like they're texting a friend or family member.
Nice. The one piece, the piece that we haven't touched on here is telehealth. And we're in the process of implementing teledentistry for our providers and our patients. And we're looking at other ways that can be used in offices. So for instance, there's your typical like face-to-face conversation similar to what we're doing right now. And I can take the camera and put it as close to my teeth as you need me to as a patient and you're the provider. But we're looking at other ways to use this face-to-face communication method, whether if a patient has a treatment plan that's presented to them in the office, but they can't stay or they're not comfortable staying and moving to another room that for a presentation discussion or a financial discussion, we can have that still face-to-face after the patient's appointment. We can send the documents back and forth and we can chat and have that same, almost the same feeling of having them right there in front of us while we discuss the reasons behind their treatment if they were unable to stay. So we think that that'll be a long-lasting piece beyond the COVID crisis and what telehealth was originally kind of shown for.
I think both telehealth and the two-way texting will allow for different forms of communication, whichever is comfortable for that person. The more people you can get on telehealth to discuss their treatment plans and options that they have, I think it's better because then the doctor can read facial expressions and then really talk them through any concerns that they may have. And that's really where it can open up to payment plan options or other options that they may have for their healthcare for the future. And so I think that's why telehealth or teledentistry is going to be huge for people who don't feel comfortable spending extra time in the office to talk about those things. Peter, any thoughts there?
Well, I think this whole thing's accentuated the need for the digital age to step forward. The face-to-face is going to be dramatically changed going forward. It'll be better than it has been, of course, during the middle of the COVID crisis, if you will, pandemic. But the ability to be able to get data, analyze data, relate information, deal with your clients all from a remote location is going to be accentuated. And it's become a de facto standard in the industry. So you either digitize now or digitize later, but sooner or later, you're going to have to digitize.
It's coming. The days of just using a phone and snail mail are disappearing, if not already. The best way to be is using digital tools.
Yep. And so when we open new offices, it's, you always open with a phone, chairs. Well, do you open without a texting solution or without a telehealth solution? So those are things to think about. Do you want me to go to the next slide, Greg?
Oh, please. Hey, as we're kind of making the transition here, one of the things to think about is just how often text messages get read versus how many emails come into your email box that you read. And you're reading probably 99% of the text messages that come onto your phone, but do you read 99% of your emails? And there's some that you look at and you're just like, nah, never mind. And so text is quite effective. So here on this slide, the long-term perspective, what things need to be accomplished for long-term success as we're coming out of COVID. Peter, what are your thoughts on the data side on what's important to keep companies nimble or agile as we come out of this?
Digitization hits you on a number of different levels. First off, during the COVID period, hopefully you had the time to sit down and actually analyze your business and see what's going on. The easy way to do that is aggregating the data and having integrated reporting that will help you build the baseline for what you've been doing, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and give you some idea of the health of your business, if you will. Having said that, coming out of COVID, you want to have a plan to go forward. The plan has to include a way to measure the success of what you're implementing on a day-to-day basis, and it's got to be at your fingertips. I mean, as you're bringing people back in off of furlough and putting them back to work, I mean, the reality is people have to have a very specific function, and that function has to be focused on driving your business through addressing your clientele, not through, say, collecting information or aggregating reports for you. So you've got to look at money spent wisely. Are you better off having a hygienist come in and having to be productive, or having somebody come in to run reports and try to give you some idea of what's going on in your company? So that I'm going to use the word waste. It's probably not the right word, but that waste of allocation has to be eliminated. It's not valuable to you in going forward to spend money in the wrong places, and you need to bring back your key resources for very specific functions. And then, of course, as you roll forward, what is your long-term plan? Did you devise one? How do you measure your success at meeting it? Going into the details on the slide, it's very simple. Case assessment. How do you manage your acceptance? How do you manage what's in process? How do you manage what needs to be addressed? We see a lot where case acceptance and treatment planning is left off the plate. It just fell off the edges, and nobody's there to pick it up. That's all going to be digitized. It's streamlined, it's automatic, it's in your hand, and you can actually action it. So instead of looking for information, I think the new going forward is going to be actioning information.
And you know, at Elite, we've done a lot of executing on these things to find, hey, what patients came in for hygiene yesterday that we didn't book their next appointment 6 months ahead. And that goes back to, you know, what reporting can you use to make significant operational changes in your organization that will keep your office busy and productive. And that was one of the pieces, like, gosh, this is such a low-hanging fruit, but sometimes it's just in the wording of the hygienist to the patient, or something that the dentist says or doesn't say to the patient when they're there for their exam, that doesn't create enough urgency for the patient to be like, yeah, okay, I'll just do that and create that appointment. It takes so little effort to do it right then, and to know and have insight to do it, to make those changes, is really important. And for us, we can't log into 105 locations every day to see this. We need to have that data aggregated together so that we can measure those things and coach those employees and be able to see how things are changing over time. The presented and accepted piece has always been big. Focusing on that can have dramatic returns on a practice. Even from my own experience, taking a case acceptance in a fee-for-service practice from 45% to 96% changed everything. Now you're not as worried about marketing spend and advertising spend, because all the money was right there in the practice. If your case acceptance rate goes up, it changes a lot of things. And so instead of focusing on what things should I cut of my business to be successful, you're thinking about what things do I need to do in order to grow the business. And that is where the inflection point really happens. And so, you know, it's a change of behavior for operators in the practice, but there's also a change of the environment and understanding and patient behavior. So, you know, how do we streamline things as we move forward? And one of the pieces that we're launching now is online scheduling, and we'll be releasing online payments shortly. The reason is because, look, if a patient does not want to stand there, take their card out or whatever, I know lots of people are even nervous at the gas pump right now because they feel like everything they touch could get them sick. And, you know, whether that's an exaggeration or not, it's the reality for them. And so we need to be prepared. If a patient wants to pay us, we need to make sure that we can accept their money. And even our VP of Finance said yesterday, if somebody wants to pay us in simoleons, we will accept simoleons somehow. And so if those are the cases, we need to be there where the patient is. And so if that means teledentistry, then we need to be there. If that means a contactless check-in process, that we need to be there. But going back to the first point on this slide, going slow to go fast, you can't just take all of these things that you believe are important to success and just load them up on the plate instantly and simultaneously and be successful. The focus is, roll them out slowly, one thing at a time, so that you don't drop the ball, because it's easy to hide one failure of launch amongst 12 things that you're trying to push out there. But if you do one or two at a time and you make sure that they are seen to completion, whether that through you're soft opening your business and you're training everybody to use the new PPE, or you are focusing on what do I need to do for my one-on-one patient experience. The value in dentistry will always be the provider with the patient in front of them. And if we lose sight of that, we've lost sight of what makes dentistry successful. And so here we need to focus on, with all of these other things swirling around in the air, that patient interaction, whether it's how they hear about us, their phone call to us, their text message, their email, or our face-to-face interaction, it all has to be correct. But we need to take one thing at a time and move forward with it slowly.
So is this a prediction you'll have a Bitcoin machine in every elite office in the future?
No. We will see. I mean, the value of Bitcoin seems to fluctuate wildly. So if we can adjust our Bitcoin prices just as readily as that, then maybe we could do that.
I guess
Nice.
one of the other difficult points or things that people have trouble with, how many clinics actually had an easy way of determining who were the clients they needed to call first? Was there, did you track who got canceled during the COVID or because of COVID, and how did you move it forward?
So that's a great question, Peter. And on the tactical side, we focused on, if we're going to get patients in, the patients who are in immediate pain or have an immediate concern, something needs addressed right away, we're going to do that now. Then second, it was, okay, if they had an appointment that we had to cancel, then they're coming in next. And then third priority were other patients who did not have a previous appointment that we needed to move. And what we found, with the exception of hygiene, we've been able to balance those appointments quite well. The issue in hygiene, and I think anybody else who's listening to our webinar today will see that the hygiene world is different now, and hygienists are coming back to work, or have been reluctant to come back to work, more so than other areas of the dental practice. And so we're finding that our capacity is maxed out right now. However, we just need to get more of our hygienists into the offices and functioning in order to take care of that patient demand. The demand is there. It's just kind of getting those last pieces together. And this kind of varies by state too. So in some of our states, we're at 99, 98% of where we were pre-COVID. Now, that's only 3 and 4 weeks out of go live after the closures. And maybe there's some pent up demand there, but we're taking that week by week and evaluating how the mix of procedures have changed. And that's something that we would not have been able to do without centralizing all of our data into one warehouse, especially with 3 different patient management systems across 105 locations. Let's go to the next slide. So I think leveraging practice information, and we were just speaking about this. Peter, how do you see, and I know that you've had a couple comments on this already today, how do you see data impacting dentistry, in the next 6 to 12 months, as well as maybe, 3 years?
Well, again, it's about having the information you need at your fingertips to be able to make effective decisions. And what we see in traditional dentistry has been, we rely on our PMS, we run reports, we put stuff together, kind of gets into a binder, it gets out on the doctor's desk, and then never gets looked at. And part of the difficulty is putting the data together, because practice management systems weren't built to do this. They have the elements within them, but when you have to run 4 or 5 reports to create another report, and then actually put it together and hand it to the doctor, and he gets a sheet of paper that doesn't really visually give him a clue, it doesn't get acted on. And we see this over and over again. Multiply that by the 100 or so clinics that a DSO could run, and it becomes a monumental logjam in being able to have any actionable items. So go back to the whole concept of the digital age being a major factor in going forward in all industries, not just in dentistry, but also timeliness of information and the availability of the information on which you can make a decision. Digitizing what you do makes it really simple. From our perspective, we make it mobile. You can run Elite Dental on your phone effectively. And it comes back in a way that tells you, is it working, is it not working, and an action plan against it if it's not. And it's at your fingertips. We've got to stop this old mentality of collecting information. Consider yourself a small business, and you need to be as efficient as possible. Same concept of bringing your staff back from furlough and getting them back into the clinic. If they're not actually putting food on the table when they're in your clinic, or creating an action item by which food gets put on the table, then you're spending money needlessly. And quite frankly, nobody has money to spend right now, not needlessly. It has to be actionable, it has to be direct, and you have to be able to measure the success of what you're doing effectively to know you're in the right direction. And that's going to go forward. If you're not doing it, your competition is. And it's a matter of who does it best. We all need to get out of this alive. And it's really important to put all those pieces in place.
Peter brings up an interesting point here around, what things are necessary and what things aren't. And that is definitely one of the pieces that we've learned through COVID. I think we've seen in the support center situations that there were things that we held true more blindly before COVID than now. For instance, maybe some employees weren't allowed to work from home as often, and now we've been able to prove that, hey, they're pretty successful at doing this from home. We can get these practices back on their feet. We can do these things. Why do we need to have all these people coming together, and we have the travel costs and parking fees, and then all these other things, even rent for large offices? And I know that there are DSOs out there that have a decentralized model, and a lot of people who work from home. And I think we're seeing probably the same things. Our employees are just as effective at home if they have the resources there. And that's where the centralized pieces of data for us have been so helpful, because while we're not running the business necessarily off of our phones, we are using one cloud-based system to pull all of our information for our accounting team to do a month-end close, for our finance team to do analysis on the business and find out what areas we might need tweaked, and then give our operations teams specific tools in order to function. And some of those might be like an access to care report. Say, show me where we have holes in the schedule in the future, so at each one of our practices, so we can see, should we be spending marketing dollars there or not? And if we are going to spend right now, where do we prioritize that spend? And similarly, we're pulling out of like what would be Dentrix, a provider AR totals report, something that's showing our gross adjustments in net for production and collection, as well as procedure counts and patient counts. So we can keep track of by provider, by location, all of these pieces that are happening without having to be tied to one central location. And that's been really, to me, that's one of the most important learnings through this is, you know, we don't necessarily need all of this commuting. Everybody can do these things from home given the right resources. At the individual practice level, there are pieces too that we're passing to our office managers saying, hey, you don't need to run this report anymore. You can go here and download it. Or, you know, you don't actually have to run any of these other reports for month end anymore, because now we're pulling those centrally, and what we had asked you once to do for us, you no longer need to be responsible for those. And they love those things. It makes the whole organization more agile and can really focus on where the real value is, and that's providers' attention to patients.
Gentlemen, I'm listening to this as with all of our attendees, and what I am finding, as we talked about looking long-term and not short-term, is that in this time of COVID, where AR is outstanding and collections are where they are and businesses have been closed for 4 to 8 or more weeks, so many business owners, dentists, DSOs are looking to cut extra expenses or get rid of things that they think might not be necessary. And what it seems to be coming from this conversation, certainly, is that there are particular supplier partners that are completely necessary to make decisions now to be successful later and to have that long-term goal. So I think a lot of knee-jerk reactions coming right now from all of these people who are looking at the numbers are saying, what can we get rid of? And what this conversation is showing is that there are some softwares from your supplier partners that you can't get rid of right now, because you'll be cutting off your nose to spite your face. And I'm going to guess that you're all going to agree with me, because that's what this conversation is. But I think for those who are listening, where do we go from here? There are partners that you need to move forward and to be successful. And how do you measure your success without being in communication with your patients and hearing from your patients and measuring what all of those actions actually did?
And Gina, to that, I mean, like, yeah, Elite Dental Partners will remain a dental support organization there for providers and that office level staff members in order to see patients as efficiently as possible. And we can't do that without significant investments in technology. Solution Reach is a technology company. Enterprise Dental Management Systems is a technology company, but they focus on different areas that are completely necessary for us in order to function. And, you know, whether everyone else listening or not, you know, if they have something or not, there are key tenets to be successful here. And it's the aggregation of data, how you need it in order to communicate to patients or to communicate to your own internal staff in order to grow the business. And there are certain pieces to that I've found successful with these partners here.
Something else I want to mention is think about the tools that you have, whether it's software, whether it's hardware. I won't go into depth about it. Greg, we'll see a smile on his face here in a second, but I spoke with Greg a little while back about a laser in an office. And the laser wasn't really being used. And looking at this tool and saying, hey, how can we use this more effectively? Or how can we get more money out of it? Because it's an expensive piece of hardware. And I think you should look at your software companies and anything that you're paying for. You know, can we look at using this differently to generate more revenue, or something? How can it help us generate some outcome that will get us revenue down the road? And that's really what I think everyone should really look at, is rather than saying, hey, I can cut this cost, how can I use what I already have installed or I already have in my building? How can I use it to try and generate revenue somewhere else? And so that goes back to the Harvard Business Review, is looking at the long term, because what it may require you today you may need more education on what you have, and that education may take you some time, and then you may need to market it and start communicating to other people in the office on how to utilize these tools better. And so that's going to take time, and so that's a long-term play. to obviously help you generate revenue in the future. And so I think that's something really important. Yes, you can always look at cutting costs, but look at what you have, and if it's already there, how can you use it more effectively? What are other people doing that are generating more revenue by utilizing these tools? And I think that's where we, look to DSOs and we look to other solo practices. I don't think you have to take a solo practice and increase it by 40%, like Greg talked about, but increasing it single digits is great as well as double digits. So there's a huge win in both areas. So
yeah, I had a conversation with a colleague yesterday. I said, oh, well, what happens if you can increase the production of a practice by 40%? And I'm like, you won the lottery, because the average growth will be 4, 5, 6%. If you can do 10, 12% year after year, you are totally killing it. And so when you're applying those pieces, you don't have to look at swinging for the fences. It's small things that we can add and utilizing the tools at hand. And especially with the comments that Alex made around, pushing those existing vendors hard. Alex and Peter both know that I push them hard. I lean on them pretty hard. I'm like, well, what about this? Can we do this? Can we tweak this? What can you help me to? I need a solution around this. Here's my problem. Let's brainstorm around this. And there have even been meetings with the three of us together talking about dentistry in this fashion. So this is not the first time that the three of us have been together talking about technology and dentistry. But it's what keeps us really engaged in, how can we help more patients and practices and providers.
The value of these conversations is we can take that collective intelligence and the solution and apply it against all of our other clients. So we learn every single day, and being able to work with a dynamic group like Elite Dental and Solution Reach that see a wide range of experiences over their clientele and their clinics really gives you a range of perspective. And I had a conversation the other day with a client. One of my questions to them was, so how many clinics have you actually touched in your career, like literally touched? And the answer was about 40, 45. And my answer back was, we're in the thousands, which just means that we have this diversity of exposure that allows us to give you creative answers to unique problems, because the reality is that problem's happened to other people before, and there is a solution to it. We can see cause and effect, and we can give you a direct line to a solution that we've learned through a different experience we had. So that ability from the digital perspective to be able to touch so many clinics simultaneously gives you a huge scope and perspective for both Alex, myself, and of course Greg gives us the actual answer. This is what it means to me on the ground. This is what happens when I do this, and this is why we either want to go left or right or center or direction we choose. And then we measure that success, and it's incredible because that library of intelligence just continues to build.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks for that. You want me to go to the next slide, Greg? Or
Yeah, let's do it. So the last piece here is around adopting a growth mindset. There are going to be a mix of feelings in dentistry right now. There are providers who have their retirement and livelihood staked against their ability to produce dentistry. So that they're pushing to be back in practices. And so those are the providers that absolutely have to show grit. They have to have resilience and dedication in this. But besides those doctors who stand the most, and their livelihood is based on that, there are others that, they come to work, there's an hourly rate or there's something else, and they don't have as much skin in the game. And the pieces of communication here are around how do you communicate to your own staff members to boost them up and keep them engaged every day. And at Elite, we took a lot of care to make sure that there were town hall calls where everybody was invited to participate, and our executive staff and others would speak about what's going on and what we're seeing. And those still continue today. We have most of our states active right now with seeing patients, at least in a soft opening stage. There are only a couple that are left as holdouts at this point. But the idea is to keep all of those people engaged who are not coming to work every day, so that they remember, hey, I was going there, because I loved what I did, but also the people who I was doing it with were important to me. And through those conversations and building that friendship piece, then we start discussing the environment that we're going back to and talking about, hey, look, this is a new world in the office. You're going to wear a lot more stuff. And the first couple of days, it's going to feel like, you're wearing a snowsuit to do dentistry. Well, from the feedback that we've gotten from our providers, most of them are saying, yeah, okay, I got used to this. There are others that are like, gosh, this is painful, but these are the types of things that we have to do. It's a new environment, and it's gonna take some dedication in order to push through some of these uncomfortable pieces to be successful. And in order to grow, and we kind of touched on this before, we can't focus on cost cutting. It's important to be conscious of what is needed and what is not. What things can be considered wasteful at particular times, given the situation, or what's just not an appropriate spend at the time, but may be later. Focusing on things that really provide value to the patient interaction and help enrich that experience will always create positivity and growth for the practice. You're not going to slide backwards by focusing on those things. It's really whatever's going to help you develop those relationships. But from the elite perspective, we're doing this on an analytical side to understand who to be reaching out to, why to be reaching out to them, and what the impact will be from the business. And with Alex's team, we're focused on, okay, what can we do in order to create that dialogue with our patients? And we found that those are two very important pieces of the business in order to make sure that we're moving ahead well. Alex, what are your thoughts in that area? Alex?
Sorry, my mute button was not unmuting. So my thought in the growth mindset is really just understanding where you want to go and using EDMs as basically a measuring stick to get there, and whatever communication tool you have to kind of fill in those gaps. That's, leading back to everything we've said through the whole time. That's pretty much, I think you need quite a few tools, something to measure, something to, obviously take action with, and then go from there. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely. In my experience, and even with a book that was centered around this, and it was called "Why Are You Making It So Hard?" And the idea behind that was take out all of the hurdles that you see that you would need to in order to be successful. So if you're going to focus on getting patients to accept treatment, then you need to focus on how do I decrease the hurdles that keep them from saying yes. What can I do? And so, it's polishing, the advertising and promotional pieces, and polishing the phone skills in an office. And then it's making sure that what you mean is what you communicate, and the patient interprets it the same way with emails and text messages and newsletters that go out. When you take out these barriers that would keep somebody from coming to the office, then you're going to be more successful. The same thing is true when we're looking at managing data. If we take out the barriers to understanding what's going on behind the scenes in our business, then we're going to be more successful. We start saying, okay, well, instead of having to email PDFs from 100 locations and send them to our accounting team to do a month-end close, Well, it just makes sense to decrease the hurdles around, did an office manager pull the report correctly? Did they use the right dates? We asked them for a month. Did they send us the previous month, 2 months, whatever? Those things happened all the time. And so we needed to reduce the barriers that were there by utilizing pieces of technology. And that's where EDMS really helped us with Peter's team. Peter, what other examples of removing barriers have you seen with other clients?
I love Waymish. I'm going to borrow that one from you. I've got the first slide. I'm going to borrow from Alex. I'm going to steal that one from you. I think the biggest obstacle is the inherent mindset of our clientele. This is the way we've always done it. Why do we need to change? COVID is going to cause you to need to change. Why do you need to change? Because you need to survive, and you need to thrive, and you need to adapt. And adaptation's never easy. There's a whole science around the change management process for people, companies, corporations. This is the time to get off of the comfortable stool you've been on. We've already been disrupted. The question is, how are you going to go forward, and how are you going to evolve? And relying on the old mindsets that I don't need to know, or that's good enough, or I'm not touching it because it works, has all gone to the wayside at this point. And you need to come back in with a very, very strong idea of what it is you want to achieve and how you want to achieve it. And that's called being mean and lean and operationally effective in going forward. And doing things the old way is not going to cut it. And if you don't want to change, that's okay, because everybody around you is going to do it anyway, and you'll be left sitting back. So why are you making it so hard? Why are you so entrenched in what you've been doing? Take the opportunity, lift your head up, take a look around, and see what makes sense, what's effective, and what is effective, not just in getting to where you need to be, but the cost of getting you there. There's a lot of waste that's happened in the industry because they've become complacent. And that's not to say that, that brought COVID on. COVID came from a completely different direction, but what it has done is turned everybody upside down. And go back to that original mindset of the first slide with Harvard saying that you need to adopt and change and move forward and have a plan. And that plan's got to go from now to next month to next year to 5 years down the road. And part of that is the digitization of your world, either through communications, through data management, through efficiency of your business. One of my favorite questions when I do presentations is, do you know how much money you made yesterday? And quite frankly, I do that for one clinic, I do that for 500 clinics, and I stop talking. Because what I get back is silence. They don't know. You need to know. Welcome to the new age. We got here through a very painful experience. We all suffered through this. Well, let's learn from it and adopt and grow. Because if you don't, you may not.
That's right.
Oh, definitely. Well, one thing that we have as well is the SR Solution Reach Success Formula is what we call it. And really there's a lot that goes into it, but really we want to increase visits by decreasing no-shows and increasing more patients scheduling. And it goes more in depth than that, but I know we're running out of time. But that formula is great because it allows you to use a lot of the tools from EDMS and a lot of the best practices from companies like Elite to do those things. So yeah, pretty important to help you guys be successful there. So Greg, I'll let you take it away, or Gina.
Yeah, go ahead, Gina. Just close us out.
Well, thank you all so much for your insights. I know that as our companies work together and we work to service our mutual customers, it's only making business better, and it's only making all of us better. So if anybody has any questions, we'll leave this slide up for a couple of minutes as we close out. If you have questions for dental operations and you want to ask Greg a little bit more about what you heard today and how Elite is handling what's happening in our world right now, his email is right there. For EDMS, myself or Peter, there's our emails, and Alex also put his cell phone there if you have any questions about patient communications. I will say that the one thing I learned in this is that your vendor partners are so important right now in determining how you're going to be successful and what your long-term success is going to be after a 4, 8, 12-week closure of your business. So thank you all so much. Thank you for those who are here. We did record this, so if you have colleagues that missed it, please make sure that when you get your recording of this, that they also, you can forward it. We'll post it on all of our media channels. And if there are any other questions, there is a little bit of time now for questions. And otherwise, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Stick
everyone.
around if there are any.